Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Industrial Real Estate Show. I'm pleased to be joined by Jim Belosic, who is the CEO and co-founder of SendCutSend. We're going to talk all things manufacturing today, including Jim's business, which is at 3 locations now and looking to even add another one or two. So we'll talk about what goes into a manufacturing facility, what he looks for when he's doing site selection, and what he needs for in the building itself, and then just manufacturing in general. But first, Jim, thanks so much for joining me on the call.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is awesome.
Really look forward to just chatting and nerding out with everything manufacturing. And it's interesting because I've noticed in the last year or so that manufacturing has become cool again. Where on Twitter or X now there's a lot of people talking about it. There's a lot more interest in it. What do you think was that turning point, or was it just always there? Was it always just kind of in the weeds of being cool, and now all of a sudden it's got a little bit of a spotlight? But what made manufacturing cool?
Yeah, I think it's always been there. It's always been cool, but it hasn't been very visible. And I think part of the visibility has come from technology. There's been some advances, especially in the last, 5 to 10 years, that have made all of these awesome manufacturers that have existed for 100 years, made them more visible online to the online community. So a lot of the stuff that I see, people are they're saying that they're discovering it, even though it's been around for 50 years if you knew where to look. Um, I think part of it too is there was everyone's getting sick of B2B SaaS, or like these kind of shady VC backed companies that really produce anything. And because that was what everyone was chasing for the last, 10 or 15 years. And I think everyone kind of woke up and was like, oh crap, we kind of neglected things that actually power the United States, like manufacturing. Um, so some pretty popular people have started digging around and kind of been advocates for the industry and trying to make it cool again. So here we are.
And it's an exciting time because it's not only are people waking up to it, but it's getting more popularity with everything. Government, the word of the day is reshoring or onshoring or
Yep.
nearshoring. It's permeated beyond just enthusiasts like myself, but it's also like businesses like you and government, and every layer of government is interested in manufacturing because it brings jobs, it brings taxes, it brings revenue. The economic benefits of it are huge. On that note, though, we have seen and even the numbers will support it, that manufacturing has been on a steady decline in the US, going all the way back to the late 70s when we started getting this idea that we could just make everything cheaper in China or other countries, and that offshoring really drove a lot of that manufacturing there. Do you, so, and it still seems to be continuing on that trend outside of some really well-known industries. Like high tech right now is big with the CHIPS Act and the Inflation Reduction Act that have stimulated billions and billions of dollars into gigafactories and batteries and solar and semiconductors. Are you seeing are you seeing interest and activity in the more traditional manufacturing space?
Yes. I would say, to talk a little bit about your point, we lost some manufacturing, and manufacturing has been on a decline, if you look at a bunch of charts and graphs and numbers. But it's like we lost kind of the worst parts of manufacturing, the most like slave labor type of manufacturing, and the worst ones to do on a human. The type of manufacturing jobs that require the least amount of thought, we lost those. But I definitely believe that we are the leaders when it comes to all the smart stuff, aerospace and satellites and defense and, like you said, high tech stuff. I think that's actually grown, but it's just more difficult to see when you look at everything in aggregate. So, there's a lot of people, sounding alarms and saying that they're worried that we're losing manufacturing, but, yeah, maybe we don't make plastic forks as much as we used to, or disposable T-shirts or something like that. But we still make a lot of cool stuff. So I think that the high tech stuff is it's only going to get better because it's starting to snowball right now where the younger people, especially like on X, I'm noticing a lot of really young engineers and scientists and 25-year-old guys who are getting out of college, and they're like, I don't want to go work for a B2B SaaS. I don't want to go work in finance. I want to make something with my hands, or I want to make something that's tangible. So all of this momentum is starting to build. And I think that the manufacturing base is here to support them. It's just, we need it, like you said, we need it to be cool again. And it's starting to head that way.
Was the single best answer I've ever heard in terms of that manufacturing number going down. But if we're losing the jobs that weren't good paying and weren't adding much value to that supply chain anyways, then that makes a ton of sense on how you describe that. So thanks for going into that on detail. What sectors are you fascinated in? And I do want to jump into your company in a second here, but where do you see a lot of potential? That new engineering student or the new business student or just anybody that's perhaps wants to start a business or invest in something. What areas of manufacturing are exciting you right now?
I'm a little weird because in our particular business, our spectrum of customers is so wide. We have customers that are um, just making something as a hobby project at their kitchen table, and they need a couple parts from us, all the way up to companies that are putting our parts in orbit, or at the bottom of the ocean, or whatever. Um, so the most exciting part for me is it's a fake answer, but it's the accessibility of manufacturing. That's what I think is neat. It's happening all over the place. Um, Before, to get something made, you had to kind of know a guy, or you had to like know of a company. You're like, oh, okay, 2 cities over, there's this guy that can do injection molding, and I need to drive over there and show my blueprints, and they'll make the molds, and I'll get all this done. Nowadays, a quick Google search, and you can find just about anything. And there's a company out there that's going to be able to serve your needs. So I get really excited that these tools are out there and accessible to people who never had access before. I remember, in the late 90s, trying to get something made. And I had to ask around to all my friends, and then maybe they had an uncle that worked at a shop. And so the uncle would, do it on a Thursday night if I traded him a 6 pack of beer or something. And that's kind of how manufacturing has run for a long time, unless you are a large enough entity to have sales guys call on you and be like, "Hey, Mr. Manufacturer, my company can help you make your parts for, better, faster, cheaper." And now, Google has democratized everything. SEO is a very powerful tool in the manufacturer's toolbox right now. So it's not a specific industry that gets me excited. It's just that like everything is out there for people now.
It's so cool how you described it that your product is can be on someone's kitchen table, it could be on the ocean floor, it could be in space. That is quite the wide range. So with that, can you tell me a little bit more about SendCutSend and how you guys got started and evolved to where you are today?
Yeah, yeah. SendCutSend, we specialize in sheet metal fabrication, so laser cutting. We have, I think, 170 different materials that we cut with very, very high laser or high power lasers with very high precision. Uh, but really, the meat and potatoes of the business is no minimum quantities, very, very quick turnaround, and very low cost. And I built the company that way because that's what I wanted as a customer. My background is in software, and previous to this company, we've been in business for 6 years now. And previous to that, I had a software company for about 10 years. And the software company was going well. But ever since I could walk, I've always been, into cars and motorcycles, or, really anything with like wheels, or an engine, or whatever. So, fast forward, as the software company is growing and doing well, I found myself being able to uh, spend a little more time in the garage, I guess, and kind of wrench on projects. And I found myself needing, kind of custom parts, things that you couldn't just buy off a shelf. So I would fabricate them myself in my garage with my limited tools, like a hacksaw and a crappy plasma cutter and whatever. Um, and that got me decently far. But as my projects evolved, I needed more precision. I needed more custom type parts. And what I found is when I would go to a local manufacturer and ask them, like, hey, I need a dashboard that's just one of one, and here's my design, I got turned away more often than not, uh, because manufacturing, especially in sheet metal, is set up to do, not one of something, but 100,000 of something. Because there's a lot of programming that goes into it. There's a lot of time invested in just getting the quote. Um, so I figured, all right, I think I could leverage some software in order to do, maybe instant quoting or to be able to help them with scheduling so they can do smaller runs, whatever. So myself and my co-founder, Jacob Graham, we started writing some software. And our initial idea was like, hey, maybe we can sell this software to make these shops a little more competitive and be able to do short run, ultra high mix, ultra low volume type fabrication. Uh, However, we've quickly found that the industry was not ready for that. A lot of guys are still used to their fax machines, or they want you to drive over with a set of blueprints and discuss it and mark it up and stuff. And I was like, dude, I just want to like upload a drawing and have it show up to my door. So convinced my beautiful wife to let me spend a ridiculous amount of money on a laser with the idea that um, I was like, I'll just rent out the time to other people who need this, and basically I get free access to a laser. That was my whole intention. I just want access to the tool. But in order to make the payment, I would just sell a few parts to a few customers and we break even. That was my intention. Here we are, 6 years later, running through thousands and thousands of tons of material, three locations, 250 employees, 260 employees. Uh, so it kind of grew beyond my initial intentions, but I can tell you it's a hell of a lot more fun than the software company. I get to actually hold something in my hands at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's funny. I was meeting with a guy yesterday who is an engineer by training. He was a structural engineer by training, and he worked in engineering for a while, but he got into manufacturing racking components. So like the large racks and stuff you'd see in a warehouse or even some home improvement stores, and he loves it. Like he's been doing it for a number of years now, and he was just so enthusiastic about it on how he could work with customers and clients, or he'd go in the back and see how everything's being welded and fabricated and put together. And he loved it. And he's like, there's no way I could ever go back and do an engineering job after seeing this. And I think that passion is clear with you as well, as that growing up and you're turning wrenches or taking a bike apart and figuring out how things work. There's something about doing things with your hands that you don't appreciate if you're just behind a computer all the time. So your passion it is infectious, and I'm sure that's partly why your business has succeeded as well as it has. So first location, how big are your three facilities? Because I'd love to just hear more about the real estate side.
Yeah. As far as like location size, we haven't quite found the ideal square footage yet. We're experimenting, and every time we do a new one, we're like, okay, that's the perfect size. And then 6 months later, we realize we needed more or less or whatever. So in Reno, Nevada, our headquarters, we are 80,000 square feet on, I think, maybe 3 acres. No, maybe a little more, maybe 5 acres, which is good. We could probably use a little more because being our headquarters at this location, we have a need for more office, and that's one of my concerns here in Reno. Is at some point we're going to run out of office, uh, which is not usually a concern with manufacturing. At our location in Paris, Kentucky, we're on 11 acres, and it's about 45,000 square feet, almost 50,000 square feet, with too much office for that location. It has about 6,000 square feet of office, which we've repurposed into a variety of manufacturing uses. Um, but the having the land and the open space is really nice because we in manufacturing we have a need for a lot of staff, so we have a lot of parking there, a lot of outdoor material storage for our scrap bins. So the land is a bigger consideration than we thought it was initially. Uh, Also, you need a good amount of land to back up a bunch of 53-foot trailers. When we're staging for FedEx and UPS and DHL and whatever, uh, you don't realize how much space you need for all these trucks to stage and turn around and load and offload material. So Paris, Kentucky is actually a pretty good size for us. It's not too big. It could use a little bit less office. Um, and then in Arlington, Texas, that one's also about 40,000 square feet, a little bit smaller as far as land footprint. We actually have a shared yard with another neighbor there. So not sure how that's going to work out long term because we keep taking up more and more space. But the yard is really critical to us. Parking, we were lucky in this one. Our neighbors are very low density as far as staffing, so we were able to negotiate some additional parking spaces from them. Um, but yeah, the thing for us is we could get too big. At 200,000 square feet, we start to run into these weird scale issues where um, everything starts to run into each other. You can't fit enough trucks in along a certain length of building and then have a really efficient shipping line to feed all those trucks because we would have to have a ton of lasers in the way too. So you can't help. It's better for us to have these little satellite facilities so that we're closer to our customers. Um, Even though we are duplicating some things like, some of our front office staff or janitorial or something, we end up duplicating each time we open up a location. But the square footage works out better for us than having these mega facilities that actually, in all of our simulations, cause us to slow down a little bit.
That makes a lot of sense to me. When so you're looking for another 1 to 2 locations, are you just picking, like you said, close to your customer? Have you almost done like a heat map on where most of that's coming from? Like, would an area like New York, I'm guessing people in New York aren't necessarily looking for laser cut metal products as much as perhaps a surrounding area where the businesses might be. Have you identified, how do you do your site selection when you're saying, okay, we want to do another 1 to 2 locations? Here's where we're thinking.
Yeah, we thought we were very, very clever once, and we took all of our customer data and built our own custom heat map uh, overlaid over the United States. And we're like, okay, here's exactly where our customers are. And we're looking and thinking that we're super smart. And then one of our engineers goes, "Hey, why don't we overlay the population of the United States too?" And we overlaid it, and it was the same. It was the same exact thing. So I was like, "Oh, damn!" Because I thought the same thing. I was like, "Oh, there's a bunch of manufacturing up in the Great Lakes, and then LA is going to be a big deal. Maybe Denver, that'll be a bright spot on the map." And it was, but it also, you couldn't tell the difference between our heat map and the population heat map. So our site selection, because of our customer base, again, because we serve this large spectrum of customers, uh, we're all over the place. So for us, our first two locations were set up specifically for logistics. I mean, Reno is just because that's where we're at, but it ended up being a very, very great place to be for logistics reasons. We're right next to I-80, so we can serve the Bay Area really easily. We can get down to LA very quickly. So from our Nevada location, most I'd say over 90% of everything we do is exported out of the state of Nevada.
Hmm.
Same thing in Kentucky. Uh, Not much stays in Kentucky. It goes to neighboring states in the eastern seaboard. The challenging place for us was Texas because Texas via ground was still like a 3-day transit from either location. So now that we're in Texas, our whole network is 1 day, maybe 2-day transit, no matter where you are in the US. So we're taking a little bit different approach with location 4 and 5, where we want to be not necessarily like in a spot to distribute to a dozen states, but in a spot to serve one metro. So, Gary, Indiana is really attractive to us right now. Allentown, Pennsylvania, these places that are uh, relatively low cost of real estate, compared to a true metro, lower cost of living, as far as housing for our staff, but still within, less than a day of transit to reach a very large population.
Yeah, again, that makes a lot of sense to me as well. You're a bit of a in between being a manufacturing company and almost being a warehousing company, being that you service B2B and B2C. So, like you mentioned, you've got FedEx trucks and delivery vehicles probably coming at all times. So, whereas a lot of manufacturing, they'll make something, they'll send it to the next leg of the supply chain, and then it gets dealt with. But you have a lot of delivery vehicles coming. Do you so with the loading on that, I'm just curious to know how you actually handle that. Or do you have a combination of dock loading and grade loading so that trucks can back up and you're doing it in there? Or what's the loading situation like for how you do it?
Yeah, it is a combo, and that's actually a critical feature for us. Often, like some of these newer, tilt up big box buildings that they're building around here. I don't know how big they are. 500,000 square feet, 1 million square feet. I don't know. There's giant buildings that are going up, and they're just loaded with dock doors.
Mhm.
50 dock doors or something, and there's no grade door, and or maybe there's only a grade door on the corner if you get that spot. And we just can't do it. So we are taking raw material that comes in, you know, 5 foot by 12 foot sizes or 4 foot by 10 foot, these large pieces of raw material, or we're taking coils that are, 20,000 pounds, 40,000 pounds into the building. And usually you have to do that with a very large forklift or gantry. So large bay doors are critical to us. And then we don't need tons of bay doors. We need six. I don't need the whole wall to be just littered with them. So we are kind of this weird thing. And so we have to kind of pick and choose, uh, where we want to make that compromise. Because what I've found with like the warehouse style stuff, it has the square footage and it has the ceiling height that we like, but it lacks the parking, it lacks the power, and it lacks the grade doors that we need for loading. And then, even like we have our FedEx trucks, the little guys that can be loaded from a dock or from grade. But a lot of our stuff does go out of a 53-foot trailer, as it stages to the hubs. Um, so loading those is a little more common, but it's hard to find these Goldilocks situations where they do have some grade and they do have some yard, and then they have enough power too. Power is a huge consideration for us, and in a lot of these warehouses, they'll give you a few amps in order to run lights and charge forklifts, but that's it. And so, for us to look at these leases and try and bring in a you know crazy amount of power, it just doesn't pencil out. So we have to be picky.
Well, and then you add on to it, a lot of these large new buildings that are coming online have zero yard. Like they have just enough yard to basically back in 53 footers. There might be a little bit for vehicle storage, but they're not designed to have laydown yard for outdoor storage. So yeah, you really get pigeonholed by nice new building, looks awesome. They're in great locations. They're strategically located, so you have access to all the major highways, high ceilings, looks great. But then, like you said, how do you get in all the raw material if it's all coming in on a flatbed or it's coming in on a you have to forklift it on. You can't do that into a small 8 foot dock level door. So
Yeah.
it and then on the other side, a lot of manufacturing buildings are the opposite. They're older, they've got lower ceiling heights, lots of yard, but they don't have any dock loading. That's the other challenge as well. So you're right, you do almost need to find that unicorn where you're blending those two together. I suspect that there will be more spaces like that come available as more businesses like yours pop up, where they do want to have that B2B and B2C access. So I don't think it'll be long before more buildings do that. And it wasn't even that long ago that a new warehouse being developed, let's say like a 500,000 square foot building that had zero grade level doors. They would build it all just with dock doors. So I think a lot of them are realizing, well, at least you need to have at least a few like on the corners and to balance that out. So it might be changing at some point. The biggest one that I can see being the challenge for you, and you alluded to it, is the power, especially the old warehouses. Historically, they had very little power brought to them. For they just didn't consider anything beyond lights and forklifts and basic electric. But now we have electric vehicles and material handling units, and forklifts are electrified, and everything has that electrical demand now. And then you guys would be even more power requirements to power your machines. So what would your facility look like if you the one that you have in Reno, 80,000 square feet? How much power do you need in a building that size for your operation?
2000 amps of 480
Hmm.
is a good start. I would take another 2000 though, because sometimes we have to make a compromise. We we use nitrogen as an assist gas in our cutting process. So the laser is let's say 12 kilowatts. So you're taking 12 kilowatts of power and you're focusing it down to the size of a human hair. Uh, and what that does is it vaporizes the metal. It just turns it into, you know, like a powder as soon as it touches it. So what we're trying to do is blow that vaporized metal out of the cut as quickly as we possibly can, and preventing oxidation and um, remelting and all this other stuff. So we use nitrogen. We blow a lot of nitrogen into that little tiny crack to get that vaporized metal out of the way, so we have a good cut. So in order to get a lot of nitrogen, there's two primary methods. One is liquid bulk, which we use a lot of. I think we probably go through 30,000 gallons a month here
Oh.
of liquid. So we have these massive storage tanks outside, which we then convert to a gas and use it in our process. The other way is you can generate your own nitrogen from atmosphere using filters. So the air is 70% nitrogen or so. So we take very powerful compressors, run them through the most incredible coffee filters in the world, and squeeze out the oxygen. And we waste the oxygen away, and then we have almost pure nitrogen that we can use. Both have their advantages, um, but if we generate our own nitrogen, it's very power hungry. So we're not reliant on trucks coming and filling us with liquid. We can generate it ourselves, but that air compression is very, very expensive when it comes to electricity. So another 2000 amps of power, I could run some very, very high horsepower compressors and use less liquid nitrogen. So again, it's a compromise. We always try and run as much generation as we can until we run out of power, and then we go back to liquid.
Yeah, that's an interesting dynamic. You've always got to be on top of that. When you were finding your space in Kentucky and the space in Arlington, similar challenges finding that Goldilocks type of space, or did you
Yeah,
choose those areas because the building was there, or did you choose that specific area first and then go and look for the building?
both. I I hope someday, like, I'll be able to like change history a little bit, and I'll be like, oh no, look how smart I was when we picked this perfect building, perfect location, and we were very smart about it. Turns out we were just lucky. Uh, we we looked at FedEx delivery maps, and we just knew on the East Coast there was a couple spots, between Atlanta and Ohio, that we could be in order to serve the East Coast. And then I started looking on LoopNet, and I was trying to figure out uh, what building I could afford and where they were located. And we came across this building that it was a perfect fit, and it had been vacant, um, and it had tons of power. It was a manufacturing company before that. They actually manufactured yellow road paint. So the yellow lines on the road, this company made that paint, which came back to haunt us because for like a year, uh, every time the wind would blow with the doors open, yellow paint would fall down from the ceiling, like yellow powder. And there's just tracks of yellow powder everywhere. Like to every urinal, there was like a yellow brick road that just went because all the guys would walk in from the floor and track in this yellow paint. Oh my God, that was a nightmare. But the building was perfect for us. So looking at it on LoopNet, it's like, oh, awesome, tons of power, right size, good acreage and everything. So um, what I didn't realize is it's kind of in the middle of nowhere. It's an hour from Cincinnati. It's an hour and a half from Louisville. It's about 30 minutes from Lexington, which is still a pretty small sized city. So what I didn't know at the time is the challenges that we would have with workforce. So we're in Paris, Kentucky, which is an amazing town. It's beautiful, but very small. Maybe it's 10,000 people. And uh, it's it was cool. It was a struggle at first, but now it's actually really cool because we're kind of an attractive employer in that region. Um, so everyone, we employ a lot of families, a lot of fathers and sons, um, a lot of multi generational employees there. So it's kind of cool. It's nice being a well loved employer in that town.
That's very cool. So how many you've got 250, 260 employees? How is it broken down over the three markets that you're in?
Um, we also have a lot of remote employees. So for uh, finance and customer support and some engineering and stuff, we have employees across I think 22 states right now.
Hmm.
Uh, Reno is the biggest. Our other facilities have Paris is probably I don't know 60 or 80 people, something like that. Texas is growing, so Texas is a small head count now, but we expect to probably hire maybe another 70 people in this next year for Texas.
Oh, good for you guys.
Yeah,
So what are some of the challenges of running a company of your size? It's because you've scaled it quickly as well. So I'm sure that there's been a lot of success stories, but I'm sure there's challenges as well.
the challenge is the growth.
Hmm.
When you're doubling, you can't plan. Actually, just right now, you know, December time, 2024, we are, looking at our 2025 plans. We can't go out much beyond a quarter or so because we're just like, well, we don't know what it's going to look like. There's so many weird challenges that come with growing very, very quickly. If we were growing at 5% year over year, it's a little more predictable. You can budget much better. But right now we just have so many unknown unknowns, and we don't know when we're going to run out of capacity. We don't know how quickly we need to hire in these different regions. So instead, what we do is we just react really well. And so our motto is, don't plan, just react. And I tell all my senior leadership, I don't care how good your plan is. I care about how you react to these unknowns. So that's probably the biggest challenge. But now we're just used to it. And honestly, I think anything else would be really boring. Uh, we're always trying to challenge ourselves. Anytime a process gets really smooth, we're like, okay, what's a new process that we can do? Or how can we like reimagine it and start over? So as long as we have those big projects, I think we'll stay interested. But the right now the growth is the biggest challenge, the unpredictability, um, and and I guess just like the constant risk taking, it can wear on you a little bit. But I don't know if I'd have it any other way.
Yeah, I mean that's the entrepreneurial spirit is you've got to roll with the punches and be quick
Yeah.
to adapt. When when you're looking at a location, and this ties in with that growth, then how do you balance the need to commit to a space? And maybe that's landlord driven. Maybe the landlord just says, I want a minimum 5 year lease. Or maybe you look at it from an economic standpoint that it just costs so much money to get a plant up and running that you're making such an investment in it. You don't want to sign a short term lease out of risk of the lease rate escalating dramatically at the end of 2 years, let's call it. So you're in that really tough spot as a manufacturer where you want to secure something for the long term, but you also might physically constrain the amount of space you have, or you might be paying on space that you don't utilize right away. You're like that you said, you're trying to find that Goldilocks size of, well, what's the right size of office to warehouse to yard? How do you balance that? How do you balance the time constraints of a lease term in your factories?
The number one way to do it is not have a lease and just own. So
Hmm.
I would highly recommend to any manufacturer that is scaling, if you can buy, it makes your life a hell of a lot easier. So the first three buildings that we had, I bought. Um, so our very first building, we outgrew, moved into another one. I bought that one. Um, and then bought another one, or then I bought Kentucky. And the constraint at the time was, um, the company didn't have any credit. You know, me and my wife did. We could personally guarantee or whatever, but no one would lend to the company any money, so they'd lend us money. We're like, okay, fine, I guess we'll buy this thing, we'll lease it back to the company, and it also worked out really well for our first two buildings because we could make changes, we could expand, we could, you know, change up our lighting if we wanted to. I could just call an electrician and have him come over and start digging around. I didn't have to talk to the landlord. So we got really spoiled with the first couple buildings. However, once we got to a certain size, there's just no way I could afford to buy, these large buildings now. In Reno, 80,000 square feet is very, very expensive, especially with all the amenities, and it just wasn't in the cards. Um, so we have to be a tenant now, which sucks. We have great landlords, um, but it just slows us down. If I need to bring in contractors or whatever, they all have to be approved. And if I want to like go change, um, if I want to make a gate larger on my fence, I have to, go through this whole committee process, and it's a pain in the ass. If the roof is leaking, I have to call them. And then they have to send their guy. I can't just like send my guys up and fix it like I would in the old days. So there's some trade-offs. And like you said, the biggest concern that we have is the loss of optionality. When we own, we have a lot of options. And if we do have to move, if the building is attractive enough, you can keep it and lease it out to somebody else. So we did that in one of the transactions where I kept it for a little bit and had a lease, and then I realized I actually didn't want to be a landlord, uh, or not to somebody else. I like being a landlord to myself, but not to somebody else. Is kind of a pain in the ass. Um, so the timing in the leases are, again, because of our growth, it's a huge challenge. I don't know if I'm going to run out of space in 6 months or 6 years, or have too much, or are we going to run out of power and then the landlord won't allow us to bring in more? I don't know. We try and build in some of that optionality into our leases, but it's a challenge. Our negotiations for our Texas facility lasted about 3 months, which is, I don't know if that's normal, but it was a long time. We went back and forth, and the legal bills were expensive. So I like to avoid that if I can own the building. But you know, we are bootstrapped. We use our own money, so we do have the constraint of capital. So we have to be really smart about it. I guess I guess what we've done, because we do have to lock ourselves into, usually at least like a 4 or 5 year lease in order to get those good rates and have some tenant improvement and stuff. What we plan on now is, okay, if we do outgrow, then we just spin up a new location. And so that's our model now, because I know I can't add on to the building, um, and I know I can't wiggle my way out of this lease. So instead, we'll just spin up a new location in a new location.
Well, and I think logically that makes sense too, because if you're using the heat map slash population map, one and the same, and your customers are all over the place, it would make sense instead of having to compact yourself into a building if you outgrow it to just add another one and put it close to where your customers are, and then there's some benefit. You'd have some duplicity, like you mentioned,
Yeah.
but I think if it's probably offset to some extent just by being closer to your customers. So
Yeah,
what?
one of the big challenges with the locations is that, yeah, there's some duplicity. Um, but one of the biggest challenges was leadership. So,
Mm,
we need a general manager to basically be an entrepreneur, and run a building and run all the people in it. They have to be very talented at operations and human resources, and they have to be mechanical because they have to fix stuff all the time. And they have to be a coach and a mentor and a shoulder to cry on. And they're these very, very unique people. And because our staff size is getting larger, we're able to identify some people and kind of put them on a coaching program for that. So we're already trying to train up people that we've identified for future locations, but it takes time, because you can bring them in from outside, but you're not sure if they're going to do it the way that the culture is. We have some funny culture things that, I don't want to bring on a guy from Amazon who ran an Amazon FC, and he's gonna go crazy or something on my guys that we wouldn't do here in Reno or something. So we're trying to figure out that staffing. The duplicity is hard, and then the leadership is also really hard.
Yeah, there's a lot that you've got to manage on a day-to-day basis, being the owner of a company of your size. What advice would you give to someone that was just starting out, and perhaps that's you starting out 6 years ago? That now that you've got this experience and everything under your belt, what would you say to the younger version of yourself or someone in your shoes?
Uh, yeah, actually, I don't want to know too much. If I knew what I if I knew then what I know now, I don't know if I would do it. Because
Hmm.
it is very hard and there's a lot of like scary challenges that we've gone through. But I would say advice to somebody starting out is uh, be prepared for the unknown. And if you enjoy that, then you're in the right spot. If you want everything to go to plan and everything to be steady and smooth, you should probably be an employee, not an entrepreneur. So uh, every day, or actually every minute, honestly, every hour at least, something weird happens. We've had fires. We've had fire sprinklers go off and flood places. We've had equipment catch on fire and burn down. Um, no serious injuries or anything, which is great. We run a really good safety team, but there's just so many unexpected things. We've had ice storms and snowstorms, and we had a FedEx truck that was involved in a rollover accident. Like its trailer load of our parts were gone. Um, just crazy challenges. But if you like that, if you like doing something different every single day, then you're all set. And I would say start out small. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Uh, because we are self-financed, we've been forced to scale slower than maybe we would if we had $50 million of VC money burning a hole in our pocket. And thank God that because if I had $50 million of VC, I would have made 6 locations right off the bat, and I would have hired 300 people, and we would have just burned it to the ground because there's so many lessons that we wouldn't have had. So we've earned these lessons, relatively quickly, but just at the right pace. So reinvest your own money, grow quickly, but not too quickly, and make sure that you can absorb all the lessons along the way.
Yeah, that's some very great advice that I hope people heed. On the making it cool again factor. So we talked about X on how X has become a really cool place for people sharing some really cool stuff that they're working on. You being one of the main ones. What if someone just wants to check into it, get into the space, dip their toe into it, and see what other people are doing? What do you recommend? X people you recommend following? What else would guide someone to?
Yeah, I mean, I spend a lot of my time on X just because there's like really intelligent conversations on there. LinkedIn seems to be kind of like self-promotion, whereas X is more like people are like just genuinely saying like cool ideas and giving good feedback without the expectation of reciprocation. There's like, hey man, here's how I would do it, or here's this cool thing that I tried, it didn't quite work, give me some feedback, and people do. Whereas on LinkedIn, it's more like, hey, look at me, you should hire me, or look how cool my product is. So the other place that I split a lot of my time with, besides X, is YouTube, honestly, and you can find some really cool channels in there, and there's people just giving away 100 years of knowledge for free, and if you find one channel, then usually like a couple other channels will sneak into the algorithm, and then that's how I spend my weekends is checking out manufacturing on YouTube. And one of my favorite things to do is look at manufacturing outside of my industry. So like I love textile manufacturing or food manufacturing or whatever. And I'm kind of watching these videos, but I'm like, oh man, I bet we could use that in our process. Like, oh, that high precision scale that they're using, to measure cookie dough. I bet I could use that to figure out how many parts are in a tote. So I guess cross pollinate, from manufacturing and engineering and everything, because there's so many ideas that can work in more than just the area that they were originally intended to.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm the same. I love YouTube for that. You can find anything you want on there, and there's, like you said, people sharing. lifetimes of knowledge just because they like to teach. So yeah, I'm a big fan of that as well. Did you go to the Reindustrialize conference when it was in Detroit?
I didn't make it this year. I think I'm going to go next year. Um, so I I have limited time. I'm traveling between facilities a lot, and there's some really cool conferences that are like thought provoking conferences, and they have really cool keynote speakers. Um, but and there's networking opportunity, but I don't have a whole ton of time for networking. So if I am going to go to a conference, usually it is to look at equipment. So I love going to FabTech, IMTS. We go to the SEMA show in Las Vegas for automotive. So I'm usually like shopping if I'm going to make time to go to a conference. But yeah, Reindustrialize is definitely on my list of exceptions that I would go to.
Yeah, I didn't make it to the first one either. It was new to me, and by the time I'd heard about it, it was already over. But I saw that they're planning to do it in the summer of 2025, and I don't know if that'll be in Detroit again or not. But yeah, that's one I'm also quite interested in. So
Yeah.
what does next year look like for you? I think I know the answer. It's you got to be quick to adapt and respond and adjust. But what are you preparing for?
Yeah, more speed, more speed. So our our demand is often a little bit more than our capacity, and so we're always like running overtime, and we're always, uh, we run 24/7, and so we're always trying to squeeze in an extra 30 minutes here and there to do preventative maintenance, and we're always running right on the edge. If a machine goes down, it causes all kinds of chaos. So in 2025, we're actually forecasting that we'll have the right amount of capacity finally, instead of too little. With that comes a lot of speed to our customers. So, our goal is order it today, have it in your hands tomorrow, and we're getting very, very close to that. Even with ground transit, honestly. So, having these locations really close to our metros, close to our customers, and being able to hone our operational capabilities is going to give us this opportunity to um, continue to offer a really high quality product very, very quickly at a low price point, and still be able to reinvest, in future growth. So yeah, it's coming. Q1, like right now, we're kind of taking 2 weeks to kind of like chill. We're like, don't push anything new. Um, don't do anything that's going to disrupt us over Christmas break. But let's like kind of finalize our plans, and then January, let's haul ass.
Well, it's going to be exciting watching you guys continue to grow. So you've got a fan in me. What if someone's listening to this and they're like, love everything Jim's saying. I could be a customer, but they don't know how. What can you do? Who is your customer? I know, no, it's
Yeah.
everybody. Some going to space, ocean, kitchen table, but who is your customer?
Yeah, our customers are um, mechanical engineers, uh, fabricators, other manufacturers, honestly.
Hmm.
So we power many, many, many small businesses, small and mid-sized businesses where maybe they make a motor, um, and someone else makes the wheels, but we make some of the other parts, and it all comes together. So um, our ideal customers are guys who are scaling up. They need a prototype from us, but then they can also grow with us as they get to production volumes. Oftentimes we'll be able to look at a customer's order history and see that they did um, a prototype, and then revision 2, revision 4, revision 20, and then they start to order. Okay, I'll take 100 of those now. Okay, now I'll take 1,000. Okay, now I'll take 10,000. And it's cool to watch these businesses grow, as they have a product that's successful. Usually the in the old days, the way that we would lose a customer is they would grow so big that they would just buy their own equipment.
Hmm.
And they'll call us and they'll be like, hey man, uh, we're going to buy our own laser. What should we buy? And so we always coach them through that. But now we have enough scale to where they are sticking with us long term, because we are purchasing raw materials at a scale that they can't touch. Um, our The way our software works and our scheduling and our efficiency, they can't touch. So my goal is to continue to be, we will deliver you finished parts for less than you can buy the raw material. So, um, yeah, lots of small businesses, um, people who are experimenting, but then if it is a hit, we can still serve them.
Very cool. Okay, well, I'll leave a link to SendCutSend, and I'll also leave a link to your X, and encourage people to connect with you. And yeah, thanks for sharing the time on this and getting into the weeds on manufacturing. I'm big fan of manufacturing in general. Anytime I get an opportunity to talk to someone as smart as and successful as yourself, I always cherish it. So thank you. Really do appreciate your time on this.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks again.
Okay, look forward to keeping in touch, and all the best in 2025.
All right, you too. Cheers.
Okay, thanks, Jim.